Welcome, everyone. Once again, welcome.
Класс, мои суперфанаты пришли тоже. Алексей Вишняков.
It looks like I have super fans. Alexei Veshnikov. I'm the head of the attack emulation and testing standoff products in positive technologies. And here's the first discussion. We're going to be speaking about attack technologies and how to evade from being detected. And we will be also speaking about the EDR class. I mean, all those things that you need to do at the endpoint so that hackers would not be able to breach you. And today, I'm joined by some great guests. Teymur Kheirkhabarov, the head of the monitoring and threat response in BI.ZONE company, and Valery Slezkintsev, the head of the Department of the Endpoints threat in positive technologies. Guys, so happy to see you all, and I think that right now in the morning we're going to be having a great technical discussion. Let us just make this top super wave, and without any delays, let's get down to it. Now, I think let's talk about the disconnecting EDR agents at the endpoint. What kind of techniques do you have to be able to blind any kind of visual detections at the endpoint and for the hacker to be able to breach into the system in doing bad things? Teymur, off to you. Yeah, hi, Alex, good morning. Like you mentioned, I guess the easiest thing you can do with the EDR, with the agent, if you look at the agents, like what it's all about. Basically, it's a server. It's a driver on the service, maybe some kind of library which you inject into the processor memory to monitor certain functions. And to work it all, EDR may have some artifacts and configuration where it takes the policies and the detection rules. So the easiest way to do with EDR, to make sure that you fully disable it. How do you do that? You can stop a service. You can upload a driver. You can damage files, executable EDR files, or those artifacts where RDR is taking its configuration from. Maybe not even files, but the registry keys. I mean, certain elements of the operation system, which kind of forces EDR. And the hacker may try to disable them and thus fully disabling EDR. And from the defense team, Valery, what can we do against this in terms of EDRs, and how can we make sure that you make RDR basically non-killable? Like you've mentioned before, EDR consists of the user part, basically the agent, and also it has a driver as a component, and the driver has to do the self-protection function. On the kernel level, you have to defend your agent process, and also some critical settings in the registry and files, and agent files, I mean.
Драйвер самозащиты тоже.
Well, the self-defense driver also has to be defended. Like, what makes a defense a self-defense? Well, because the driver itself is defending its own core or kernel structures. So you kind of put your trust in the code, in the kernel code. And anyway, attackers would begin with a user mode, right? That's why the goal is, while they're still in the user mode, do not enable them to do certain operations with the ADR and with its artifacts and files and components. Yeah, of course. Of course, and if a hacker they can execute their code in the kernel, well, basically, it is not a scenario you can see very often, and also it's a problem. It's quite a big one. That is, it would be best to block it even before a hacker was able to download their own driver. Valery, one question I would like to ask you. Would it be possible if, in this case, you can do some kind of indirect analysis of your own system, kind of, trying to study your system integrity and making sure that things, intercomponental things would go well, the processes would go without any delays, there would not be any, data in terms of malfunctioning. And sometimes, maybe once in a while, you can do some tests of a certain system configuration also in the kernel. Would that be possible to do it with the ADR solution? Of course, you gotta do your system integrity check? It's a quite big question, though we're going to touch upon this later on, I believe. But the brief answer is yes. You have to do this. You have to do this, the event supply and also the structure on the side of the kernel. And, well, you know, the one which is being used by the EDR driver. So it's about self-defense, self-protection. But I guess I would always consider self-defense. It is not like a cure-it-all which will enable to prevent EDR being killed in 100% of cases. I guess this is not possible because sometimes you just cannot do it all. But I guess whenever attackers are trying to bypass it, they will be doing any things like, you know, delete files and stop events. It's going to trigger some events. So I guess our main goal is to build a certain set of signals to make sure that the goal is not to prevent, but the goal is to generate a number of actions by which you understand, okay, somebody's trying to break into your system and tamper with a driver or with an agent. Yes, this self-defense basically has to generate a lot of events, like something is going on, and then because it's an ADR, you know, SOC is going to see that something is wrong in the system, and this is a reason to check it. Well, let's talk about some events. Okay, it's if you have a self-defense, let's move on to some different ways. You've mentioned events. Okay, events are being collected by the agents, and then they're being sent either to SIEM or to a server. And oftentimes, you know, a decision to react can be done on the service side. So the agent has to have a static connection with the server. We know, okay, the EDR process is, you know, right here. What if you do something so that it would not be able to communicate to the server? For example, you can do it in an easy way to add the firewall windows, but again, it's quite a big noise. If you're doing a monitoring, you know that this is like an unusual event. There was a ADR silence tool, probably not super new, but again, it's a VFP, operational system direct communication. So basically, based on that, even the built-in firewall is working in firewall for all the endpoint solutions. It enables you to tamper with traffic and get knowledge about the traffic, and also add filters which are you know, broken. So basically, it adds the rules and it blocks the whole traffic. So now the connection between agent and the service is lost. Events are not being transferred. You can do whatever you want, but events are not going to be deleted, by which you're going to see it. The response may not be working in full operations if you do it on the service side. Like, what do you do in this case? Well, I believe that, first of all, in this scenario, an agent has to send some kind of heartbeat onto the server, and if this heartbeat is no longer going, then you got to highlight it on the server side to make sure that the monitoring team would be able to see that agent is off and something is not right. And secondly, the agent has to be quite autonomous. It should be able to react without any network connection with the server, and to be able to identify VFP filters. There is an event, also in the event log, so you can check it. I think it's a 5441, 5447 is the code of event. Yeah, but there is an event, it's not going to get to the server. Yeah, but like I've mentioned, the agent can react autonomously, and based on these events, it can basically take away the blocking filters. Okay, that makes sense. So we are hoping for this kind of autonomous reaction and also making decision on the side of the agent. Yeah, I think it's a good coverage of this case, and it is so important to be able to control your part and to be able to kind of monitor that we would not be dependent on any connection with the server. And you know, when something breaks down in your infrastructure, and also when the hackers are trying to get into the system. And you may think that they are a different situation, but you can basically have the identical consequences. Let's change the topic. Okay, we have an event, and this ADR solution is feeding on that. And can a potential attacker, you know, from this point to be able to impact the work of the entire hacking device and to disrupt the supply of events. And how can they do it? What kind of events we are speaking about, and how can this disruption be happening? Timur, over to you. Yeah, you're right, because right now we begin by saying that, okay, either we stop the flow of events, I mean, we're cutting off its function or its informing. But basically, you cannot kill the ADR, but try to kill certain components. I mean, because ADR depends on some event suppliers in operation system. And so you can impact those suppliers. ADR is working, you know, the bits we're working as a server, it's all green, there is a connection, some events are flying, but not all events are flying because some of them are simply being cut off by impacting the provider. And I guess right here we can think that would be foolish not to use operational capabilities because ADRs are supplying events to drivers, but you can Windows SendLog, you know, things like that, you can count on them, and also ETV providers who are part of those providers are at the same time Windows SendLog, and some are not, though. And okay, it's great, the operation system is doing all the work, we do not have to impact on it, and we increase performance impact, and we're getting just an operational event. Windows SendLog, if you kill Windows SendLog, you basically can put on the system, you can correct policies, you can, you know, change login settings and journal settings. So I believe this should not be a main mechanism, and probably an auxiliary one. But again, from the side of defense, if an agent is fully, or to a large extent, is counting on the Windows SendLog, log security events and stuff, so what do you have to do on the side of an agent to be able to build this connection and to this kind of window event signature more like resistant and more kind of tamper-proof?
Можно сказать, что
Well, what can I say in this situation is that if an agent is fully trusting event log, which has been cut off, you can see it for the monitoring purposes. This will be an anomaly of no events are being supplied from the agents when agents is on. Well, makes you wonder, right? It's an anomaly. It's very bad. So you probably have to start some kind of investigation. And secondly, like you've mentioned, we should not trust only to one source of events. And you have to have some alternative source, like your own drivers, where you would be able to see that some kind of process is opening handle for event log and completing flows or doing some kind of destructive manipulation. You can also react to that. That is, from the defense side, we're not counting on the events log only. We're also counting on our own components by kind of cross-pollination. We're looking at the integrity of the system, of each kind of channel of getting telemetry by the agents. Yes. In addition to Windows SendLog, what is ETV? You can read it now from the logs. Windows SendLog is basically from the catalogs. It's a file where events are going to end up into the, like when there is a system consumer is signing up to the ETV provider and then writing those events into the file. So the agents could get to the ETV. I do not know any single ADR which would not be using that. Even if you look not in ADR but some kind of sysmon of certain events by DNS requests, it's a getting like from the ETF provider. .NET monitoring also in many ADRs we're getting on .NET runtime ETV provider, and there are a lot of ETV providers because operational system in Microsoft does not give you any other ways of getting like certain interceptions. Okay, everybody's getting onto this ETV, but I think ETV is also like quite a thing. It was not built for security. It's for debugging and fine-tuning. Nobody thought about making this mechanism resistant. There are sessions, writing events, and for the debugging, it should be easy. You just turn it on, you stop it, and so on. But when we speak about the safety and security, we get some events, then we get this issue and problem of resistance. You can stop ETV system by the stop trace or logman, or by API functions, stop trace in API, for example. Like, how do you do this? What are the options of how you can counteract to that? Yes, we do have them, but again, the standard disconnecting by via Putil or logman, this would be it will be seen. It will be noticeable for the SysMon, for example, but also by any other component, alternative component. By what do you mean by visible or by seen? Yeah, it'll be, yeah, makes sense.
Там, собственно, парсинг команды и параметров.
And then the parsing of the team and parameters, you know.
А если мы не вефутил или не логман дергаем, а напрямую вина...
What if it is not logman vefutil, but directly to API, or like we pull API, there is no start of the process?
Есть механизм такой хукинг.
Well, there is a way. It's a hooking mechanism. That is, if we'll set a hook on...
Ну, ивент, как я забыл, ивент стоп.
I forgot the name of it, like a stop trace. Then it's also going to be, you know, it will be visible by the EDR, and you can react to that as well. What if not stop? What if you do not stop a session, but you keep it like a working, running? It's working in running. We're double checking the facts and availability of it's active. Like we take in SysMon, for example, and SysMon, be it a SysMon, be it a .NET, in ETV. I mean those processes which are being used by ETV for writing events, and when we sign to ETV provider, we can connect. They're also using certain API function. I think it's ETV event write, I think. That is, and one of the popular methods of bypassing ETV is being patched. It's being rewritten. You can find the address of the function, you do the patch, and then voila, you know, the session is working, but events are not being written. So the consumer supplier who is trying to get the events is not getting anything. Well, it will make sense to check the integrity of the critical functions once in a while, like ETV and write, and also you can see it when it's being patched, and the agent themselves can actually restore it. So what you're saying is not only double check the availability of some kind of connection to Hookai, you want to connect once in a while that basically is being hooked at this moment by the time you're checking it. How often do you want to do that?
Если мы видим, что
Well, if we see that
перестали поступать события определенные, то
you do not have any inflow of events, there will be a reason to make this kind of inspection. So the kind of, it's not a time-bound events, but different events which will be triggering the things. Yeah, the time-bound, or it's also right, you can do this kind of check once a minute. Once a minute, I think it would be quite good. It is not going to hurt your performance too much. Okay, then, and next my question is for our audience, guys. How are you doing? Are you good? Is everything okay? Are you following the ideas? It's all good in terms of like my pronunciation. Are you guys okay? Your brains are not fried yet? Yeah. We were heard and we were saying, yeah. Any other things like, are we good? Are we good? Except for air conditioner. It's great that people say, you know, make it cooler in the audience because air conditioner were hot. Anyway, let's continue right now, and maybe later on you'll change a solution. But guys, you know, guys, you can play like a hardball. You can speak. I think everybody's just excited about this whole thing. Make it louder. Make it louder. Okay, we'll make it louder. Absolutely. Let us continue. You have already mentioned as a part of our discussion of how to defend ourselves better, like hooks, interceptions. Let's talk about that and how can this technology, which is using ADR solution, you know, can be taken down by the attackers. Teymur, what can you say about that? Yes, Valery has mentioned some hooks and certain API functions, you know, to be able to see like if anybody's trying to do some bad stuff. And also, this is the case. Unfortunately, Microsoft is a closed system. And while before, they had like a patching from the SDT, from the table, and everybody was intercepting API functions right there. No problem. And then Microsoft came with a defense mechanism which broke different things like a patch card and SSDT, you know, fell apart. Like you cannot do it because the machine would not be able to support it. But what is provided by the the callbacks by the OC, you can start a process, opening handles to different processes. DLL, it's a limited toolbox of operations for which you are given a legitimate interface. So the manufacturers of the protective tools, EPP and antivirus, they have to either use the ADV, which we've been speaking about, but ADV is not also, you don't have all the events, or the user hooking. I do not like this thing because if you can do something without the user hooking, you can do it without it. It's very invasive. You get the problems. Developers get problems with the stability, performance, and so on. And secondly, this technology is not super reliable.
То есть, чтобы прохукать в процессе определенные функции, то есть, что значит прохукать? Это значит, что когда процесс вызывает функцию, например, write process memory, сначала вместо этой функции управление передается в каком-то...
First, instead of that function, actually the administration has been transferred to the malware, and this is about EDR, and actually it would write that
если там с синхронным превеншеном.
actually whether the synchronous prevention has been engaged, and then the management would be transferred to the identity function. This is actually how you can prevent the enabling of some API functions. But you have to be inside every process. In order to be inside there, you have to inject DLL. Usually that would be done through nuclei. DLL would be uploaded into every process, and it would install different hooks and would process that. And for instance, we can make sure that actually you download that library. So the library has been downloaded and you upload that. Once there is no library, there will be no hooks. And you use a free library. Yes, we start with the conventional thing. Why not?
Видно с помощью, в принципе, даже того же хука на free library, на самом деле.
And actually, it can be exemplified by hook free library. The uploading of library can be monitored, and that could be prevented. This is a kind of a vicious circle, but if we make sure that the library will never be uploaded, and we can use some protective measures, security tools, Microsoft have some policy features. I don't know in what release it would add it. For instance, I can install that into certain process. It's kind of a policy, and for instance, no libraries can be uploaded except for the ones which are allowed by Microsoft. And any library would not be uploaded. And sadly, some of them have been endorsed by Microsoft. And if the library is not endorsed by Microsoft, it will never be able to upload. Well, actually, the scenario is as follows. The processes that were launched before the malware, it already have the library in malware. Process also has this EDR library. It can trigger only the daughter process. We can trigger that daughter process with a flag. And there's no library there. Well, in essence, as far as I know, this is a library technique, and the library would upload, as far as I understand it, before you block the EDR library uploading. Well, actually, we have to rely on the arrays. You never have to trust that, because it would fail eventually. This is a kind of chasing your own tail. Well, actually, I have another question. If you trigger the nucleus, it would be user modi. This procedure would be in the queue, which says upload the library. But as far as I understand, it would be done in user mode. Well, you don't have to rely on hooking, as far as I understand it. I feel it
Это вообще
Launching the process with such a flag is not a very frequent thing.
тоже как бы повод, ну, не прям подетектить, но как минимум дать алерт об этом.
And at least it would give an alert. Well, at least the change of that flag, for instance. You may keep track of the status of that flag before the launch of the process and after that.
На это обратить внимание.
А в ядерных колбеках можно отслеживать не только загрузку, но и
Can you keep track not only of the uploading but also of downloading?
Можно не в ядре, как бы в ядовые.
Well, it can be done not only in the nuclei.
Есть событие unload library.
There is an event called Unload Library.
Должен быть какой-то комплекс.
Any EDR solution has to embrace a whole set of measures. You don't have to rely on one only.
Как бы хуки у нас работают, как бы хуки можно снимать.
So hooks are working, you can remove the hooks.
Она такая смотрит, хопа, хук.
This is what malware is doing. So it sees a hook and actually it sees in the memory the first bytes of the function and compares that against the drives in the library.
Ну, кто как бы слабый и не
And
смелый,
probably we can say that we have been patched.
там свой процесс. Но это скорее
And the process would be completed, and I've never seen that the process would be
как снимать,
allowed to
перезаписывать
run,
памяти,
but
первый
the
байт,
hooks would be removed, and
соответствующей библиотеки.
the first bytes would be replaced with the bytes from the library. Usually the hooks would be installed not only the kernel 32, but
Этот юзермодный трамплин.
in order to
Соответственно, атакующий
bypass that
копирует
user mode.
в этом anti-DLL как бы ищет пролог соответствующий,
And
как бы некую сигнатуру легитимной функции, копирует ее и
some signature of the legitimate function would be sought and would be replicated in memory. And this is how the hook would be removed, because it would trigger
На самом деле, как раз на моменте
the
чтения
process. I think that this is something that we can detect when anti-DLL has been
ну, как бы,
taken from the
DLL происходит, ну, и вообще,
kernel.
в принципе, системных библиотек, как правило, происходит в load library.
And usually,
Вот, если это происходит где-то вовне, то это повод.
if takes place somewhere from outside. If not, then this would be
anti-DLL в процесс, как бы
actually when you will have to keep track of that.
Второй момент, да. То есть, если
Well, this is the second thing. Yes, that's true. If the second anti-DLL is taking place,
повод,
then
в
naturally
принципе, за
you have to pay attention to that, and you have to complete that process. Okay, look,
понял, что там ты ловишь
we understand that
повторной загрузки anti-DLL, как бы в принципе много кто так
actually you
делает. Берем, порождаем дочерний
keep
процесс.
track of the second DLL uploading, and for instance, if we run the daughter process having access to the memory,
Его в suspended
and
состоянии, то есть потому что
we keep that in a suspended mode,
скорее всего после
because the hook would occur later after the suspended mode.
состояния идем в память.
And once it is in a suspended mode, we look for the DLL process. We would copy some data from that process and then would rewrite that in our main event where we have a hook.
Перезаписать.
And so it means that we will be able to rewrite a hook.
на самом деле.
Well, it looks very suspicious.
Плюс
The launch of the suspended process. In addition to that, the launch of the daughter process.
ну, хотя нет, ладно, у него там anti-DLL он загружает штат.
Now, it is uploading the anti-DLL
Чтение
in a normal mode,
пролог,
reading of bytes
функций, и самое главное,
of certain function
перезапись
and rewriting
anti-DLL.
of the prologue in the anti-DLL.
Чтобы понять, что процесс запускается в
Well, in order to understand that the process has been launched in a suspended mode,
callback не дает это состояние.
you will be able to do that only in hook in order to activate the
Ну, либо
anti-process memory. You will need an
ты, скорее всего, в России не подпишешь.
ITV. And in Russia, you'll never be able to subscribe to that.
Помогу маленько, да, можно же, ты упоминал в начале вот интересную историю, можно же
Well, you mentioned a very interesting story. EDR may control the state of its objects and check that against some benchmarks. So if hook has been rewritten, you may see that the hook has been rewritten. We see some unexpected bytes,
тревогу, ну, соответственно, восстанавливать.
and we would sound an alarm
У нас повреждение хука.
and actually trigger the alert that hook has been damaged. You have to check the efficiency of your hooks.
Проверяйте свои
С
хуки.
молоду, да.
Yep. Check your hooks every morning and every evening.
Хорошо.
Okay.
Еще один вопрос в аудиторию.
Another question to the audience.
Картинки ассемблерного кода, где там прологи функций, чем там
Do you imagine that server code, what we're intercepting?
Да, вот этим занимаетесь.
So you're doing that every day. Okay, that's great. People online, you are art guys.
История обсуждения. Вы классно.
And we changed the topic. Thank you for telling us that story, and almost no one understood anything.
Теперь давайте поговорим о том,
But now,
действия атакующих не нарушают
how
работу.
the attackers' actions do not violate the work of the EDR solution, so it functions well, but at the same time, the hackers are bypassing the detection techniques and tools.
Вариаций
One of the options
как они скрывают свои действия, это спуфинг.
is
Давайте раскроем
spoofing.
поподробнее.
So let's speak more about spoofing,
Представляют, как это работает.
what spoofing is about, how it works, and what we do about that.
Уходим от какого-то
Well, in essence, we
EDR, когда мы его, в принципе, ломаем полностью.
get away from the evasive impact on the EDR, so we do not hack that, but we do some hidden actions so that it's not been reflected in the telemetry that the detector is not activated. Speaking about the detect function, for instance,
Категории, что ли, детектов.
there are two categories
Ну, они такие наиболее эффективные, чаще всего используются. Одна из
which are most efficient, which are most widely used. Parent and child abnormalities. Some process
в принципе, это аномалия.
has launched another process, and for instance, when Microsoft is running PowerShell, so this is abnormal. The rationale of the rules is the following, for instance, a process has been launched and its parent is ABC, and it should sound an alert, and you can cheat these things. In essence, you can
иметь одного родительского процесса, но для системы безопасности, для того,
use the same parent process, but for the EDR, it would look like the process is different.
как этого добиться,
Now, there are different options how you can achieve that, and parent process spoofing is one of these ways. And thanks to legitimate opportunities offered by the operational system. Now, there is a section of startup info. In essence, you can render handle to the process, which would like to look like a parent process. So the handle functions have been rendered to that process. And for instance, Microsoft Word is launching PowerShell, and we write that this is a Zamex that is launching that, and this is actually how we can get to the kernel, and we see that the parent-child link is similarly quite good, and we will now be able to detect that well. Speaking about parent-child link, in essence, that's a very important thing to pay attention to these things.
Ну, собственно, вот технику, которую описал сейчас вот Тимур.
And Teymur described that case very well.
С помощью ETV-событий, в журнале EventLog, по-моему, в kernel процессе.
EventLog, I think in the kernel process there is a start process function.
Поля, которые могут помочь нам определить, что
that may help us to see that the parent thing is bit is replaced, is substituted. And there is another field which shows that initial parent bit, which is original. If you compare them, it would turn out that they are different. And then it should sound an alert. And the driver callback, which gives an information about this launch of the process. If the memory doesn't cheat me, and there is actually some data about the flow or stream properties, so it's very similar to ETV. The same might be done in the driver. Well, I have another proposition. Look, we intercept, in that case, kernel callback, and may intercept any important manipulation with the systems. Because actually, there is a lot of cryptographic features which has been incorporated in the user mode, and access to the register, to the process, to the flows, this way, that way. For instance, modification, removal, this is an invasive impact on the system. After the launch of the process, of the first kernel pullback, you may intercept that for the second time within certain invasive impact on the system, and you can compare that couple. You may get an original parent pit, and at the second interception, you would get a non-original parent pit. It won't help. It won't help. We'll proceed with another topic. But from the very beginning, the pit would be substituted. It would be done at the launch of the process, for instance. If we speak about the parent-child spoofing, then you can compare that to the command line in different moments. And the substitution takes place after the process is being launched. And in parent spoofing, actually, the substitution takes place right in the kernel.
Интересно. Как будто бы не сошлись. Ладно. Так, дальше.
Okay, I see that there is some controversy. What else can be done?
Здесь мы прям делали спуфинг, можно спуфингом-то в принципе не
We
заниматься.
did a spoofing.
Можно создавать процессы так, что
You can create processes the way that,
то есть ты создаешь процессы,
not directly, you create processes, you initiate a process, but in essence, another process would create that process, for instance.
популярные макросы, в которых
There were macroses very popular, where through EMI you would launch a process. So it means that the process would be launched indirectly. It would be a process called GRAD, and that's it. In essence, the parent is not a word, but rather the server, process server, which processes those
куча ком-объектов, в которых есть разные методы, там
call-ups, and shell execute, shell browser execute, and other
это еще тема там недоресерчена.
functions. And this topic is not researched yet, so there is a lot of COM objects, and in essence, it launches a process, but the parent of that process is the server process of COM object, and in essence, it would look like COM, and again, it would ruin the parent-child link, and no anomalies would be detected in the kernel, but the link is ruined. Okay, for VMI, there is another journal, a log, which will help you to restore that link of the process which was used by a VMI. And if it is not a VMI,
Microsoft Windows RPC он называется.
then I think Microsoft Windows RPC it is
Там,
called.
конечно, сложнее, но можно восстановить тоже.
Well, it's a bit...
А пробовал хоть раз подписаться на этого провайдера? Там просто поток.
Have you ever tried to subscribe to that provider?
Его можно
Because the flow is so busy. Well, actually, I can filter that.
Если знаешь как, расскажи.
If you know how to do that, tell us.
Ну вот, например, по там ID интерфейсов, которые приводят к запуску.
In terms of ID interfaces that would launch the process as well, filtration of the big stream is very resource intensive. Well, there is another way around.
Как минимум,
At least,
ну то есть, если мы, допустим,
for instance,
через там, MSExec что-то стартуем,
if you launch something through MS.exe,
сопоставить, да, то есть скоррелировать
then you can
вызов.
just oppose the launch of MSI process, and immediately after that, another process would be launched, and you compare that. This is how you actually reinstall the boot. So we'll get back to the hooking, monitoring of IPC, Microsoft features, and RPC. That's a very important process, but it doesn't give us any efficient monitoring tools, but you can hook either RPC service or RPC clients. The task there is not very easy, but still it can be done. Well, we're getting back to the hooking that we discussed.
Ну да, вы как минимум
So there are certain maneuvers that may help you to bypass the hooks.
вы распределяете в этом плане нагрузку и можете
So you distribute the load, and you can make some interception somewhere,
какие-то триггерящие ситуации в прошлом. То есть если что-то
bearing in mind some triggers in the past.
выставить, какое-то время понаблюдать, что там будет
You
дальше.
can set the hooks and to see what is going on, and if nothing wrong happens, then you remove the hooks.
Валерий, так
Besides, Valery, the question goes to you, what features can be used so that this rationale works
по каким-то триггерам
in terms of installing or removing the triggers or hooks in the RPC functions
которые мы хотим на каком-то
or any user mode functions
мониторить.
that we want to monitor?
Я не совсем
Can you give us any cases?
Формулирую,
I missed the question, unfortunately. Well, the very idea is that we have to be able to intercept some frequently enabled functions on a temporary base, but some brief period of time. But
Обозначали за счет подозрительных действий в прошлом.
actually, we would detect some suspicious events in the past and some legitimate consequences in future, so that we won't have to somehow keep track of those functions for longer. What triggers are there in order to start such a check, such a verification? Well, in essence, that's a very broad question, very general one. There are a lot of techniques that have a pre-detect function, and that is a good reason enough in order to start checking the processes. I think that we are approaching side loading, which has a lot of pre-detects. We can speak more about spoofing. We are not approaching that yet. We are just scratching the surface of. Just special for me, give me several cases. What are the suspicious triggers? Or how they look like? For instance, the launch of the suspended process. That's an excellent trigger in order to start an extra check. Or, for instance, putting the memory or something. Okay. You wanted to something about the spoofing. We spoke about the spoofing of the parent process. If we look at the EDR rules and some antiviral things, low bins. Low bins, this is a strategy for the modern security tools and features. But actually, low bins can be detected very easily. So DLL or other tools are being used for that with a command line, which is very typical. So, for instance, the attributes of that command line should sound an alarm, should trigger a detect. We look at the command line, and there are a lot of command line, this is a very good feature you can use in order to detect suspicious events. You can make the logic more sophisticated. The producers of operational systems, for instance, try to make that more convenient for the users. In a regular phase, you can make certain attribute, and actually it may be on the second, on the third, on the fourth tier or position, and you can vary the positioning. Well, which is worse, you can use abbreviations, especially in the PowerShell. PowerShell encoded code, and it can be minus in code, minus NC, etc. And you can vary that with the upload case. And for the detection, that's very difficult. Either we have to make some regular software to detect that, or we can try to bring the command line in compliance with some normal rules, doing some parsing, sorting there, for instance, before you scan it. So you normalize that and think in advance about all the varieties of how the utility may perform this or that function. If we hide the command line at all,
запускаешь процесс в suspended состоянии, командная строка откуда берется обычно?
And the command line,
в том числе виндовым штатным аудитом, сисмоном и всеми там EDR-ами, антивирусами, она берется из...
EDR and antiviral things have been triggered by that whole structure. We actually launch the process in the suspended mode. We go to the PEP, we look for the command line, and we change the values, and then the mainstream goes on its own, the process goes on.
Аудит берет командную строку из ПЕБ и берет ровно ту, что мы ему подсунули.
And we would take exactly what we actually dummy that we put there, and everything would look very legitimate.
Как раз мы уже затронули эту тему. Во-первых, для того, чтобы...
Well, actually, we have already touched upon that topic. In order to do the detection You have to detect the launch of the suspended process.
Имеет смысл сравнить командную строку, которую...
And it would make sense to compare the command line that you have intercepted and read that through PEP. Well, if that... What you compare that to?
Ну, как бы та, которая пришла в create process.
The one which get into the create process. So we compare the command line with the one which we actually obtained end of the day. Okay, we are running out of time, and there is a first question on the chart.
Тот, который мне понравился.
There is a question that I liked most. And we'll make a kind of a blitz. So the first question goes to you, Teymur, and we expect something more concise and quick. And the second question I will ask myself.
Хуки. А если все на сисколах сделать ручками?
Hooks sound good, and for instance, if we actually make everything manually, how many hackers you met randomly or within certain projects that can
ручками и все.
make syscalls manually?
Как бы да, мы когда говорили про хуки, не затронули там одну историю.
Well, we speak about hooks, and we didn't speak about not enabling syscalls, because there are some techniques, and a lot's been said about that, of a direct enabling of syscalls. And this is not being used very widely. And even certain frameworks emerge that initially are evasion-driven, not work, for instance, when certain operations would be triggered. SAS is run not because of enabling of the DLL function, which can be seen through stack trace, but directly through syscall. So this is not being used widely, and it can be used quite widely. And you know that frameworks actually are the very favorite target for the hackers. So I expect that I will penalize you very soon once actually you tell us the names in terms of the advertisement. Valery, the question goes to you. Whether these approaches are the EDR process, what do you expect from them? What would be your answer? The direct enabling of syscalls. This is an unpleasant thing, but hooks, for instance, may be past that. But in terms of a driver, we can monitor the stack of calls.
Произошел вызов сискола без...
We would see that the syscall was enabled without enabling of a DLL function. All syscalls have to be there normally. Syscall register would show that to you. It would be either unmapped or actually would be directly in binary and subtly. There is an indirect syscall.
Если мы сейчас туда пойдем.
Но мы их побережем.